Occasionally a dam. I drive my children nuts with wastewater travel pictures. So.
That's better than what we usually find on social media. That's true. Unless it's the cat pages, then
And those are okay.
Okay, let's start. This is the April 24th, 2024 meeting of the Village of Newport Board of Trustees. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So you want to do a roll call for the board?
Mayor Cowley?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Doro?
Here.
Trustee Herzog?
Here.
Trustee Contino?
Here.
Trustee Murphy?
Here. Okay, thank you. So tonight there's two topics on the agenda. The first is for us to review the RFQ proposal from Ty and Bond regarding the upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant. And the second, we'll go into executive session to discuss the police chief interviews that we completed last week. So just as a head up here, there were two responses to the RFQ to do with the much needed upgrade to the 50-year-old wastewater treatment plant. We previously reviewed the proposal from Delaware Engineering, and now we're going to review, the whole board's going to review the alternative proposal from Ty Bond. So with that, I'll introduce Aaron Moore, who's the Vice President of, why don't you explain your title?
Hello, everybody. Yes, so I'm Erin Moore from Ty and Bond. We're so thrilled that Tim and the board asked us to be here. We think this is an amazing opportunity for the village to really take a look at this facility and make it a facility that's going to be resilient for years to come, serve the village well, not only for your needs now, but into the future. So I know it's daunting, it's a huge task, but you're really well positioned for great funding to move forward, but doing this once and not having to think about it, and again, 5 years upgrading something else, and 5 years upgrading something else. So that's what we really, I know the goal is to talk about like what our proposal is, but we did submit qualifications, so I'm just going to spend a little bit of time before handing it over to my coworker Damien, just telling you the general information about Ty and Bond, who we are, our team, etc. That'll be brief.
And Aaron, do you mind standing to the other side so that the board can see?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Is it not going?
It's fine. I'll just get some exercise. So again, what we're going to do is talk very briefly. I'll describe Ty and Bond, our qualifications. The meat of what we want to talk about is what is our proposal. And then I have recommended next steps for the board as far as where I think your mind should be in an immediate sense. Moving forward for this project. So I'm just going to cover that. I'll step back after Damien and cover that. So our team is, I'm Erin Moore, I'm a vice president with Ty and Bond. I am from the Rhinebeck office, pretty close by. That's office of about just shy of 20 engineers. So I would be the role of project director, which is making sure the team has the resources and staff that they need to be able to move forward. Emmanuel is the project manager. We gave you guys a break. He and Damien are both really passionate about our proposal, and you figure you only need to be bombarded with one level of technical information. But he's recently, very recently been involved in the design of a very similar project, so we've got some great talent in there.
Where was that at?
Emmanuel's project was, what was the town it was located in? Do you recall?
Sorry.
I know, it's Connecticut. It was a Connecticut project, yes. Sorry, he told us a lot about it, and what the community went out of our heads. So he's responsible for keeping on task, in addition to technical chops, making sure we're on task and making sure we're on budget. Damien is here with us, who would be the technical leader of this project, and he's got 31 years of experience living and breathing wastewater, and I'm going to turn this over to him in short order. And then Dave Sesh, our staff engineer, he's got 8 years of experience. He'd be working with Damien to produce a design, but this is the process design and project management team. Ty and Bond has a full suite. We're a multidisciplinary firm, so there's other support engineers as well for electrical, structural, things along those lines. But this is the core team. Everyone here has been here to the plant once, twice, some of us 3 or more times. Now I'm naming no names, but I think you're going to see that a lot of consideration was given to what we're presenting as far as how we would proceed technically with this. So Ty and Bond, we're a more than 100-year firm, founded on doing municipal water and wastewater. So that's what we started with in 1911. That's what we continue as our primary focus to this day. We're approaching 600 design professionals, but you can see from the map, all in the Northeast. So we have a great deep bench of wastewater engineers, and no one is not scattered across the country in the Northeast. So that's really important from resources perspective. Additionally, I think I covered everything I need to cover there. So that's not as crisp as I would, and I don't want you to read the bullets anyway. But again, we're a multidisciplinary firm. So we have civil engineering, environmental science consulting. Under the heading of environmental engineering, that's where wastewater, drinking water, stormwater, and solid waste falls in. Our building services, geotechnical, electrical, mechanical, plumbing engineers, HVAC, structural engineering, and then we do GIS and 3D modeling and things along those lines. So we have a pretty wide, varied group. And so because of this, and the, again, multiple engineers we have a really robust QA/QC process, so quality assurance, quality control. So Damien can't operate in a vacuum or a bubble as far as being a lead designer. What happens is during the process of design, we have a technical advisor who will start out, be a separate engineer from the design team. In this case, it'd be Fred Mueller, who is one of our technical directors of the firm. So at all the milestone points, there is a QA/QC process. We're an independent from a technical perspective. And then my role especially is making sure that gets done, that the questions or comments or thoughts on what's been proposed by the process design team, that they're answered and verified. So while we've got a great core team, we also have the ability, because we do have a good level of staff, to have someone outside look in and say, well, what about this? What about this? And so I think this is a big value because internally, we're making sure we're going through a QA/QC process. It's not your operator's, obligation to say, what about this? We want to be checking on ourselves, and we document that process. So one of the benefits, I think, to working with, for a scope of project like this, a little bit bigger firm, is the great different number of staff we have that we can bring to the project. And just to show, I think just really put up this slide, we have so many wastewater projects where we do upgrades, but I thought I would show some recent projects. One of them is water, but really close by, just to show the scope and the scale of the projects we do get involved with. So Kingston, we're just doing final closeout right now, but that was a $10 million wastewater upgrade project. That was actually involved a huge level of regulatory work because we had to put in a deeper outfall, and that substantially changed actually their permit limits. So there was a lot of DEC negotiation with that, as well as a pretty complex construction project that had waterfront, some heavy waterfront engineering. Hyde Park, a smaller project, but we felt really at home when we were walking around the plant because it's a very similar plant that also needed some substantial upgrades. So the big sand filters, same facility, similar facility. Some things different as well, but that was a $3.5 million upgrade. Poughkeepsie, we're also just finishing. That's my one water project I put on here. But that was a complete replacement of all their ultraviolet disinfection. So that's a $4 million project. And then we're all very involved with Beacon, who's doing a very large solids upgrade. And so really we're doing a lot of municipal wastewater and water engineering right around, in addition to the projects we're involved with throughout the Northeast. And just want to mention, we also are really familiar with grant funding. Now, you've already been successful with a WIA grant, that's wonderful. It doesn't stop there. There's, first of all, which I'd like to talk about at the end, you have another grant opportunity that's been specifically recommended to the village by DEC. So you want to be poised to go for that. So there's grant procurement, and then there's communications with those grant agencies as the project proceeds, making sure we're staying in the bounds of what is reimbursable, really important. There's some complex requirements from that front. Then when we go to bid, it's making sure the contractors are delivering what they need to. They have very strict requirements as far as different participation. Right now, where you buy materials from, it's the Buy American, Build American Act. That's a requirement of the grant that you do that. The contractors need to provide documentation. They're compliant with that. That's really important to make sure that process is happening. And then we get to the end, it's the payment documentation and the closeout and keeping our minds on all of that. So it's once you get the grant, that's great, but then you get engaged with the grant agencies throughout the life of a project, and we're really familiar with that. I think at that point, now we're gonna get into the guts of what we're doing here technically, and I'm gonna hand this over to Damien.
That was a good overview, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
You like Darren, you're gonna hate me. I'm more technical, and I try and keep it simple, and I'm not a presenter, so I'll be stumbling my way through this pretty well. We kind of put together what we thought were your goals, and feel free to jump in at any time if I got something wrong. It's to eliminate the overflow, the white tank over the other side, to treat the sewer flows and try and eliminate everything without, as they come in, get everything that comes in. Replace the equipment in a way that you can actually, have working equipment for years to come, not have to worry about going back. And then also equipment that's flexible and can grow with you. When I say grow, I mean if your permits change, you need to be able to adjust. And we think the SBR equipment that we're presenting.
Now, let me just stop there. Any other goals you have? Like, for example, I want to make sure a goal is that operations continue while this is going on.
Yeah.
Right? That's got to be a fundamental requirement of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Anything else, Scott, that you see that should be on this list in terms of goals you want to see at the end of the game?
Well, just in terms of that, so again, before you jump in, that's one of the things we see. Every plant, no matter what, when you're upgrading it, you gotta keep things going. But
Right.
our intent in what you'll see in the design is to lay out the design in such a way that we can keep the exact operation you've got going now, operation. So we actually hopefully reduce the cost of bypassing everything. So by doing what we're gonna propose, it'll help with that.
Okay,
So
good.
it's actually a cost saving.
Anything else in your mind?
Well, I mean, one of the things we want to do is get rid of the aging plant, right? So the sand filters for one, right? So they were built in 1971, and they've been, repaired and stuff, everything on the surface, but nothing underneath. So stuff like that, you're pushing. They're older than me, so stuff like that needs to be. I think it needs to be replaced. It's old. Aging, it's labor intensive. It takes a lot of manpower to go out there and clean those. So that would be one goal which we've had for years. Obviously, we want to get rid of the sludge drying, the whole sludge process, because we've been, as I've had last year, having trouble getting a sludge hauler dry, that is, and from my conversations with those contractors, it sounds to me like it's gonna be harder and harder over the next years because nobody wants to take it, nobody wants to put it in a landfill. So my feeling has been we should abandon any solids on that end, just haul liquid out. In that case, we have to have a bigger digester than 24,000 gallons, so that would be something else we want to look at. But we need to handle all the flow that comes in. We need to handle whether it's routine 100,000+ gallons a day, or when we get the, the peaks.
Mhm.
Because if we don't have the ORF, which is what that's there for, then we're not going to be able to discharge out of that anymore based on our conversation with the DEC, which we don't want to anyway.
Mhm.
So we got to, whatever we put in, it's got to be able to handle everything and treat it and meet permit.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, our goal in the process is to take everything in, treat it to the permit levels, and even at the high flows, treat it, not provide some alternate system that's gonna,
Good.
here's a backup that's not really a backup.
Right.
Our goal is to make sure everything going
every
out
drop that comes through
is treated.
treated to
Right.
meet our permit, right?
Okay, good.
Just the theme of those three things that you just noted are risk. And maintenance of plant operations during construction. Crapshoot, we often reach out to contractors to try to get. In fact, we had a conversation with a contractor about this plant. They said the thing that limits one of their biggest variables in bidding on plant construction is maintenance of flows during. Are they bringing in temporary blowers? Are they bringing in pumps? Where is it going? How is it going to go? One of the biggest considerations. So what we're proposing eliminates that. The plant can run as it is right now, and we can work around it. And again, we had a conversation with a contractor who's that we could do that with no problem. The plant just runs.
Okay.
Taking away that risk. What's in this under those sand filters? Likely transite pipe.
It is.
Expensive to remediate. Better to just leave alone in the ground. From a perspective, that's not, Aaron, that's recommended most, if DC, you're trying to deal with something, if you can just abandon it in place, preferred recommendation from them as well, so.
You okay with that, right?
Well, I just want them, everybody know, in case you know what transite is,
Oh.
asbestos.
Yes, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's why
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
we know that, but
Oh,
Sorry, that's the term, like,
well, I
but
just
it's
know most people know what asbestos
oh,
is.
okay,
no,
thanks for
thank
that.
you.
You are.
Risk, right? Sludge, solids. It has become a really hot topic, not for an issue you're having here, but because of the emerging contaminants PFAS issue, less and less and less people are taking dried sludge. It's an industry issue. That isn't your problem, but it's creating your problem because there's less and less tolerance for taking the solid sludge on because of this pressure from this emerging issue. So by doing a different sludge process, mitigating risk, your operator, just all three of those things in my mind, limiting the village's risk. And so that's definitely what we've taken to heart also.
All right, good.
So,
I'll stop now.
oh no, it's great.
Yeah,
It's
gonna keep
I
going.
let I talk for that. So you have a trick to eliminate and replace the new tankage with is the drying beds. So that allows us to demolish the drying beds and put in a new treatment, and then in a stepwise fashion replace the headworks and everything else. And then once we've got the new treatment in place, then we take over the solids handling as well.
All right, so the headworks is right here, the smallest rectangle? Is
Yeah,
that
and
right?
I have bigger pictures.
Okay, fine, yeah.
I think. I don't remember. But so influent screening, inline grit aeration, influent pumping, and again, as we go through the process, we've talked about eliminating the pumping if we can. But that's digging in the ground if we're doing that. And so we need geotech results and see, because the cost might get outrageous.
Mhm.
So the costs we've done now are based on putting it at a decent level and pumping like you are now, so that we can carry it.
So you're saying if we can use the topology of the, just have a gravity flow system, that reduce the need for pumping?
Yeah, that's always the hope. It's
Yeah.
it's a shot in the dark, just
Okay.
based on the situation we have here. And it's a lot. There's a lot of excavation involved anyway to do that. So, but we that's one of the things that Scott and I were talking about a little bit, and hoping that we can potentially do that.
So your proposal includes pumping, but
It includes
once
the
you get there, you may be able to
But if
reduce
we-
the cost.
Once we do the geotech
Yeah.
evaluation, we'll be able to say, oh, to do this, it'll cost this much.
Okay,
To do, so it either, like, again, it's all whether you hit rock or whether the
Mhm.
soil is right?
All right.
So Damien's gonna refer to costs as he goes through. So I think what you're seeing is we've assumed not the worst case scenario, but the most conservative scenario.
Okay, good.
With places that as we go through, we can identify where we may find cost savings. But the last thing we wanna do is come in front of you and make optimistic assumptions and then none of them happen.
Mhm.
So we've gone the opposite
Okay,
way.
good.
Yeah, I'm not pessimistic, but I try and be real. Like through this whole process, I try to be realistic on everything. I went through and we got multiple quotes from different manufacturers for the different pieces of equipment, and we carried the price that made sense and tried to keep the numbers down.
Okay.
But there are options that are going to go through. Influent metering, obviously we're replacing the existing influent metering. So the main piece of the treatment is sequencing batch reactors, and we're able to do those. That's replacing the biological process in two tanks. Well, two tanks that are doing everything. So it's in a batch process. So I'll run through that later on. I have a diagram.
Okay.
Then the effluent equalization. And again, with that, we're also talking about how we're going to do that as either it goes to the effluent directly and then gets pumped through filters, or my goal is to hopefully be able to take that out of it and go straight to the filters and have the equalization tank is like a backup. That'll allow some savings in energy costs because you're not aerating something that all the time, and you're not pumping it twice. Then cloth filters are what we're looking at is to replace the sand filters and provide that extra tertiary type treatment. And then we reconnect to your existing disinfection system with chlorine and defluorination and reaeration. And then for the solids, we're looking at for the screenings and grit, we're looking at trying to repurpose the tankage only for the
Can you point actually where on the,
yeah.
just walk over, that's fine.
Right here.
Oh, okay. all right.
For the, and again, I have another bigger drawing, which will be easier to discuss, but trying to repurpose that equipment, not the equipment, sorry, the tank, because obviously whenever you're doing excavation, you're digging into the ground, and this way we already got shoring and sheeting. It's basically it's only, so we repurpose the tank, fix the tank up, and put the grit and screenings equipment in there to save costs of excavation and new structures for that. And then the aerobic digester and the equalization tank will be replace the aeration tanks if
So Scott, you were familiar with the SBRs before. You said you were going to go look
Yes.
at another system with some
Yeah.
fellow VR guys. What's the story? Where'd you go?
We went down to Peach Lake,
Peach Lake?
Yep.
Okay.
and the system down there works very well.
How long has it been in place? No? Okay.
I could find out. I didn't ask that question, but it's been working for a while. I mean, it's different than what we got smaller, and they have pumps. You know, our feed's coming in as gravity, their feed coming into the plant is pumped, so it's kind of intermittent.
Oh.
So it's different in that aspect.
Mhm.
But as far as the operation of the unit, it's a different unit than we've been looking at here, but it works.
Okay.
They're happy with, they meet all the permit, you know, they don't have any problems.
What was your take on the maintenance required for this reactor?
Minimal,
Minimal?
yeah.
Okay. All right.
yeah. And
How many places you installed these SBRs?
these particular
Well, these kinds of things.
I haven't installed one in a while.
You haven't? Oh, okay. So this will be new to you.
Yeah. Well, this one, yes.
Okay. All right.
So, but to get to some of your questions, the SBRs, if you just picture them just tanks, that's what they are. Because everything, the way we're designing it is all the pieces of equipment are actually, you pull them out. You can pull everything out to replace it or fix it or maintain it. And that leaves you the tank to have flow continue through depending on what the issue is. And again, we'll get to the different pieces with it. You can see here, this is where your existing sludge digesters are. And this would be a new building, and this this would be the two SBRs sitting on the location of where the drying does.
Mhm.
And then the tanks that are currently the aeration tanks, and that you have the new aeration equipment in and the new blowers for, you'd be able to repurpose those tanks and the blowers, so you're not throwing away things that you just purchased.
So the flow is where? From the headworks?
Yeah, so the flow comes in
Yeah.
at your existing headworks point, and then at this point, we're running it along this line and then kind of getting it into here, and then I'll have a bigger picture of the headworks as of equipment, and then it's pumped into these tanks. And it's I think you mentioned you went to see SBR facility. SBR is sequencing batch reactor, so it's like a sequence of processes. And some manufacturers, and I don't know the one you went, whether they do it, but some of them do the true sequencing batch reactor, which is what this is designed on, so the tanks are bigger. And some do a flow-through sequencing batch reactor, whereas if, they're constantly letting a little flow through,
That's
and
the one that
they're decanting.
I saw, yeah.
So it's not a true sequencing batch
I see,
reactor,
okay.
which is, you'll see difference in that, and that's, some of the stuff we'll kind of go through during design and make decisions on how we want to make it.
Okay.
But that's why this is actually bigger than probably, well, and maybe the size is bigger too.
Yeah.
But the true batch reactor has to be bigger because it has to handle the full flows, even the peaking flows that you're handling without having a problem.
Are you going to show us later what happens after the sewage goes to the stream?
Oh, after it goes to this.
After it comes out of there and goes towards the stream, you just still do chlor-dechlor? Or?
Yeah, you maintain the same process.
All right, so it goes to the same
basically,
system you have today?
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll get to the filters too. So it'll go through everything, and then it'll hit the filters,
Okay,
go through the
fine.
filters, and then reconnect into your system. And then Scott and I have talked about some little tweaks to the effluent, just to kind of maybe help reduce some energy costs and get better chlorine disinfection without as much.
Okay.
This is your headworks. But so our intent is to replace this whole thing, but again, keep this online. So you saw from the picture, you guys are turning it right as you come in.
Mhm.
Our goal would be to bring it forward much like it used to originally go. So
Oh, is that right?
1930, it went straight through
Is that right?
into that tank that we're going to reuse.
I thought you were going to say 1930, it went straight through right to the stream.
Well, it went to that tank, and then after that tank, it went out to the
Is that right?
stream.
Yeah.
So basically, all you had was just
A holding tank.
holding
It's-
essentially, until 1971.
But the cost was great. Two solid systems.
Sure.
This, I don't know how much time you've all spent in the plant, but this is so small. It's so small. It's no wonder that there's been incidents. You walk up to
Again,
all the teams walked up and said, "Oh my gosh, it's so tiny."
it was built in 71 for 150,000 gallons a day, and now we're doing over 200,000 gallons a day. So.
And I guess that does bring up the point that one of the things is the headworks currently is a choke point, right? It will be a point where everything goes through in the future, but this piece right here, the channels are small, the screens are bar racks are small. So what happens during high flows is you actually overflow the channel, right?
It backs up. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, again, I think we mentioned the last time we talked, that once we define the peak flows, the system can get smaller. But right now, I think you get to 700, and then you're guessing, because 700, you overflow the channel.
Mhm,
Because
okay.
your flow equipment can't tell you how much more you're getting. So again, when we look at the costs, we assumed $1 million because that was what we requested. But in looking at some of the data, it may be somewhere between 900 and 850 or something.
Okay. Peak.
Peak.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the headworks equipment, and we looked at a number of different pieces of equipment, but to do and fit in the space that we have available, this is the one we're showing on our drawing right now, which is basically, it sits in a channel, and it's a drum that rotates and pulls, collects the solids up and then runs them up through a pipe and then through an auger pipe and washes that material and then drops it into a stream, into a basket, or a trash can. And the bagging system is more for an odor collection, but I don't think you guys bag anything there, you just throw them into the dumpster
Yeah.
with a cover on that. And then the other one is another type which is less expensive. It basically is newer technology that it's the same bar racks, but what happens is it's doing the same process. This here within this channel and then in that pipe and dumps it out. It's this they use a lot that has started to be used for in replacing a grinder, because you can put it right on the end of a pipe and then it lifts and disposes of the screens and you can have it under. And so the reason we're looking at this one because it has a smaller footprint and it's a little less expensive. So again, those are kind of things we'll bat back and forth when we're going through the process
Okay.
of determining it to get the screens, to get rid of the rock stones that come down and any of the rags. So that and again, that's an automated process. Both of these are automated process, so you're no longer trying to rake screenings, and you're no longer stuck raking screenings during a big storm. And if you're not out there, things get flooded.
Mhm.
I think some of that's the backup issues
Okay.
that you run into. And then this is the same thing. Is a grit option. We looked at a couple different grit options. This is an aerated grit option. Basically, the grit comes in on one end. There's air sparge, and it kind of lifts the biological material and lets the grit settle, and then the grit is augered out into a trash can or a dumpster, much like it's shown here. We also looked at the vortex grit, which is a bigger process, and same thing with the stacked grit, both larger and more expensive. And I don't think they are appropriate for this plant just because of the cost.
So you're proposing the aerated grid?
So we would be looking at the aerated grit,
Oh.
which is and again, you'll see later, hopefully in the footprint. Both this system and the other system fit within the existing MHOF
Yeah.
concrete.
Beautiful.
I always have to jump on that because I can never see it.
Okay.
Again, in the thought, and I'll show it to you, but basically, it'll basically fit in the channel, and the walls of the channel will be, first you will repair the walls and trim them up to the right place, and then the walls and the new walls will be put in so it fits in really nice.
We do this so much. So here's our treatment. First part, how it works. Getting rid of all the solids, like the solids that we're not going to deal with in the biological process.
Mhm.
So the baby wipes that washable that are not.
That's right.
We have
Biodegradable they are.
that's what gets caught on those bar racks. Everything that's not supposed to be put down the toilet but does and ends up at the plant, and things that should. That's the solids are what happens and what's the first thing is getting before we move on to the more of the contaminants in the wastewater that need to be treated. So that's what it starts out with solids, and then we go to the more biological treatment processes.
Yeah, and the goal is also, and you know, is to get the solids you don't want in while keeping the biological material in so it can be treated and actually be used to treat
Mhm.
the wastewater and feed it. So this is an image of the SBR process that this is actually the aqua aerobics process. Again, it's a couple of tanks in this case, two, and in depending on the SBR technology that's chosen, could be 2 tanks, could be 3 tanks, whatever. But for the aqua aerobics process, it's a 2-tank system to be able to handle the average day flow, the low flows, and all the way up to the peak flows. And again, the sizing of this one was 1 million gallons right now.
Now they're covered, right?
No,
They're not covered.
No. So they're similar to the aeration tanks that you have.
Tanks aren't covered now.
Right?
No. Well, I thought we had the housing. Oh, that's it's a giant. Okay.
But again, most people probably wouldn't think this way, but at being around wastewater treatment plants, it's how you take care of the wastewater, whether it smells or not, to a great extent. I mean, if you have really well aerated wastewater to keep it from going septic or then you keep it. You don't get as many odors or hardly any. I mean, even at the plant right now, you've got aerobic digestion. You can't smell much anything when it is, but if it was anaerobic digestion, you smell it, you'd be a little like, you know.
Well, it does smell down there sometimes, right?
There are times when it does.
Yeah.
I don't know this, the science behind when or why it does, but I think you had said that with this new system,
Yeah,
less
I mean,
opportunity for odor.
yeah, and then you also have your sludge drying beds and your material out in your filter beds, which is a lot of sludge. So that stuff sits and dries. That's going to give off odors too. And then when you're, the digester, when we're trying to take water out, you got to decant it. So sometimes we get odors from that. That it sits a while, so you can take the water out of it. But that's the sludge process. That's not the aeration process, the biological process that we're talking about here. That's basically the end.
Yeah, it's usually the transition, right? When you're transferring the sludge,
Oh,
then
okay.
it's sitting down there, you can't aerate it.
Yeah.
Because,
You
when
transfer
you're
to
aerating
the
it,
beds.
that's when things are happening. And in this process, you're aerating it, and it doesn't allow the controls control the amount of oxygen that's in the system. So when you let the oxygen drop and it starts to go septic, just like a septic tank, that's when it starts to really smell. So if you're
So
controlling,
relatively speaking, will it be less odor, same odor, more odor? What?
I would certainly hope it's not going to be more.
Okay.
Whether it's going to be less, I think probably only because you're not going to have sludge drying beds and all that. You're not
okay.
going to have to be pumping sludge as far as to a bed.
Yeah. Okay.
They'll be pumping it out. You might get some when they sludge haulers come in.
Okay.
yeah, and we had a plant in Southington, Connecticut. The odors really they haul liquid sludge all the time, and the odors come when the hauling actually
okay.
takes place, and we actually worked with them to design a system to kind of try and pull that off and put it through another control system.
Oh, wow.
If it gets to a point where you're like,
All right.
they're right next to baseball fields, football fields, and
Yeah.
have a lot, and they're huge. Gigantic plant. So
Alright.
that's so this is just kind of depicts a couple of pictures. I mean, you have your floating mixer, your decanter, and then you can see your aeration starters, and you can see they're all retractable, and you can pull them all out of the system while keeping the tanks in operation. So that's a benefit.
So these are above ground.
Yes, currently. And again, my big hope is gravity.
Yeah, okay.
Though I design pumps like nobody else. No,
Mhm.
I prefer gravity because
Yeah. Sure.
it's cheaper for me. I always think it's better to not spend energy than to spend it. So
Mhm.
if we can, and you've got some filled area in
Yeah.
the front and down in the back. So if it all works out, and again, that's another question that comes with the geotech and the survey, because and probably some talking to Scott a little bit about what does it look like just outside the plant in the sewer, and can the water, and can we modify something up front to get a little bit more head coming into the system? You just don't have to worry about that now because you've got a pump system.
Sure.
So it's something we have to take into
All right.
consideration. So this is a little more detail on the process and now here, but basically the first step in the process is it's filling, and you're mixing at the same time that it's filling. And sometimes you need air and sometimes you don't. It depends on what you're looking to do in the process. So in this case, in the case that we'd start out with your process, it would be not aerated and you'd be bringing in flow and filling. And when it gets to a certain point, stops taking in flow, the flow starts going into the other tank, and you start going through the actual reaction process. And you still, in this process, they're actually filling at the same time. So again, when you get to a point where you're like, oh, we need air, they kick on the air and they're still filling, and then it switches over to the other tank, and then this tank goes into react. And when this one goes into react, then you're transferring. So you always have flow going into one or the other of the tanks. And then you get to a point where you stop reacting and you settle, and that's what's happening in your clarifiers currently at the wastewater treatment plant. And then you're decanting and you're pulling flow off of the filters and sending flow to the digesters.
Just a traditional conventional plant does these steps right now in all different tanks. So it goes to one tank and flows to another and flows to another. And this is why this process is such a good match for trying to do something a little more consolidated and stay away. It's all the processes, the totally normal conventional processes that happen. This isn't like a different technology. It's just the advantage is doing it in one tank, but it's the same process operations, just keeping it in one piece. So,
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask, because I'm not a presenter, as I was saying. I much better react than present. This is after you decant and after you get the clarified water out. This is the last step where you're sending it through filters to filter out any smaller particles that are left in the system and send it off to the disinfection. So these are cloth filters, and again, there are different manufacturers of cloth filters. We're just showing one of the manufacturers just to give you an idea of what it is. So inside the new building we're proposing, you'd have steel tanks with filters, and again, easy to access for the outside and from the inside. And they're not outside, so you're not going to have algae issues inside these tanks. To benefit from what you have now. This is just an example of the building that we put together to show how everything's going to fit in. And these are the right size piece of equipment for everything, so that we're basically in front of. We're basically sitting in front of the tanks, and what we're looking for with this is when we looked at the costs and what we were looking at, we looked at two different options. It's precast tanks or cast-in-place tanks where you're actually building the tanks on site, or precast tanks in a precast building where you're actually bringing in forms or pieces and putting the tanks up and sealing them up and doing anything. Just to give a couple of options and see how things lay out. So again, that's another thing we're looking at. There we go. So screening equipment is one of the impacts. The geotech and the survey are pretty major impacts. Where the groundwater lies, these are all things that will impact the flow discussion we've had, and then the essential utilization of the clarifiers. Currently, we've designed the system not taking advantage of these two clarifiers at the back end, but if once we're done, we look at them and everything works out real well, you get extra flow or storage for something. And then again, then you kind of decide what you want to do with it. Well, I got the picture up. Does anybody have any questions about
Nope.
that?
You're doing great, dude.
Christ. Glad.
All right, so before we get to the money,
Yeah.
Mike, what was it that Wappingers was always complaining about us not screening out of our water? Phosphorus, right.
Well, there was always an issue that we would have the engineering firm go ahead and taking water and test it before the flow went into the plant, and then test after we released water, and they would come up with the same number.
Before and after.
Before and after,
Yeah.
and they would say, how in God's name is that possible that that we get the same number going in and going out, and then being told somehow we're dumping into the stream? And the only explanation I used to get was that the DEC was looking at our total load of what we were taking out of the plant, and then summarizing from that what percentage must be phosphorus, with no real testing to actually verify.
Is that a requirement of the permit we're assessing with them?
Well, we're currently required to test for it every month.
Test for it. But
We
there's no
have
limit.
since 2009, so
Okay,
there's no limit,
okay.
but we test for it every month.
Now, does this system do anything to affect the
Well,
phosphorus
And that's,
content?
we go back to the SBR, if you picture the different stages in the SBR, there were 5, I think.
Okay.
So-
Just to clarify before we move
Oh,
on,
go ahead.
I just know that with the, with the assessment that they did in the last 5 years, and the recommendations that came out from that report, their recommendation were that we be put on some kind of a phosphorus level reduction plan, because they were saying we're coming up with all of this stuff that's going into the water and, eventually affecting aquifers like.
Okay,
So that could be something coming down the road, even if they don't have a phosphorus limit now. They'll look, one of the reasons they did a $500,000 study was to start to find ways to be able to control the phosphorus, which is why we invested in those sand filters that we purchased that have been sitting at the plant for 2 years.
all right, so for now we know that we're not adding phosphorus in our process. Nothing you do here reduces the phosphorus.
So, well, that's the, so.
Am I?
With the,
Oh, okay.
the cycles in the batch process, you saw 5, you can add processes in that. So if you take the water down, or the wastewater to a point where it's anoxic, it's another step in the process. You can add it. That's why we're saying it's flexible. You can adjust.
Okay, fine.
And then the filters at the end allow you to take that.
So we don't want that included in your proposal because
Correct.
we don't
But
want
it-
to.
But you have the
to
flexibility
manage
for
it.
the future
Right.
to adjust what's going on here.
All right, fine.
That's what it is. It's not a fixed system for you.
Good.
You can look at the nitrogen, and like right now, I don't think you have a nitrogen limit. You have a ammonia limit right now.
We have ammonia and TCAN, but that's changing.
Correct.
So,
So
The ammonia one is changing.
and the TCAN is going to be eliminated.
and that's why I think we like this process for you guys, is because it allows you to grow with you. And again, I know nobody wants more flow coming in, so that's not what I mean when I mean grow. I mean grow.
Mhm.
If I understand the process correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, just so we all understand, like the flexibility. So it's not, you don't have to add anything to it. It's a matter of myself or any operator just manipulating the computer essentially to say, okay, instead now I want to change the process.
Oh, is that right?
So we don't have to go out and say, oh, we need to go re-engineer something.
Oh.
It's just basically changing timing and controls.
Correct.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And so whoever the manufacturer is, you work with them, and they'll say, yeah, here's what you can do if you want to do that, and with us, and that's how you do it. And as you go, you can make that happen.
Yeah, because when I went down to the one in Peach Lake and spoke to the guys, after they got it, they spent a lot of time changing, timing schedules to get the treatment that they wanted.
Oh, okay.
The sequence essentially. They tweaked the time, whether it was, it was a 4-hour sequence, but then they changed the timing of every part of it to get to the limits they want and controlling DO and all these different aspects.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, again, with a true batch process, you have even more control than with a flow-through process where you get some of it going through anyway. You get your full mix, but you're still getting some going out, so you're letting your quality is a little less. And that's, again, one of those things we kind of look at.
So, Pat, any issues or concerns or questions you have about this?
No, I'm learning a lot though.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Not as good.
Okay, let's talk about
I want to
values.
come back to, I'll come back and ask you about the Wappingers Lake study, because anything like that equals more fundability, which is what I'm thinking of, is anything like that equals more points scored on additional funding resources. Yeah, so it's
Okay.
good information to have.
All right.
Yeah, so again,
So we can't see this. Can you blow this up, or do you have copies we can look at? Is this the same as what you gave us last time?
wastewater guys.
If that is, then I have them.
Make it crisper? What can I do here?
Well, that's the projector.
Yeah, project.
I'll vouch for that. Get it ours. Coordinate
That's
this.
right.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh,
You're purposely going past it.
no, I was trying to.
You know?
There's the best I can get.
Yeah, I know, I'll guarantee you
Well-
spin your wheels.
Yeah.
Can we get copies?
I have two.
Can you make 2 more, or 3 more, 4 more?
This is the same as
The one
left
you
here.
presented last time was dated March 15th?
This is
Okay.
in
You
April.
didn't, do you change it?
I didn't.
No?
Okay.
Then
Okay,
it's-
fine.
Yeah, so what we did, and we shrunk it down a little bit, but what we did is we went through the entire OPC process.
Opinion of probable
Oh,
cause.
sorry.
We love acronyms.
Construction costs.
You okay?
Got quotes from probably 3 vendors for each of the pieces of equipment, if not more, just to kind of get that, and then, did the cost estimating for the concrete, did the cost estimating for if we were gonna do a prefab building, if we we're gonna do a metal type building, if we were gonna do a precast type building, or with brick and mortar. And really try to lock in on the costs that made the most
But
sense.
to lock in, you've also decided which of the options you've been talking about you're going to proceed with, right?
To a certain extent, yes. Again, with the SBR, which option? There are multiple vendors there, and I think there's more to deal with on that one. But the one we have works and will function great for your system. We just want to still keep it open and have some discussions with Scott and you guys as to what's really going to make even more sense. Because again, as I said, the size of the tanks are based on a true batch process as opposed to a flow through process where you get a little smaller tanks and have some.
Okay.
So the smaller tank is the pro, and then you have a couple not so great things.
And Scott, well, you got yours?
How big are the tanks you have designed now?
40 by 40 by 23.
How many gallons?
I think they're like 300 and something thousand, 333,000.
That sounds familiar.
I did that on purpose. I knew. Yeah, so each of them. So again, it's not the full million, but the way the process works, you're pushing it through in the correct way. So they're sized to handle what needs to happen in the time that needs to happen. And it, yeah, I mean,
Now, this is that's the second page. This is the first page, right? It talks about the upfront.
yeah.
Starting with general conditions.
I just gave you this is a presentation.
It's a what?
So you guys have.
Oh, it's a summary. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the
We have it
summary.
broken down.
Yeah, right. By category.
So I hope you can see the level of effort we've tried to put into this, because I'll just, from an introductory standpoint, we understand in 2022 was proposed in the original PER. And there's a lot of sort of band-aiding, sort of like manipulating of your existing things to try to add in these processes. But again, given some of the risks, we'd have substantial concerns that you would actually be able to deliver even the scope of that work for the proposed budget. And it just didn't seem to be enough consideration to some of those things like maintenance of flow, and some of the rehabilitation of the tank itself, even then I go back into risk, repurposing that tank. There's concern on our end from some of these things. But again, this is a higher budget, certainly than 2022. 2022 would be escalated, obviously should be, because now that's a little older. But we've spent time to bring you a number that we think is very, very real and achievable. And if anything, we believe that we could, during the process of preliminary design, you'd look at ways, can we make this number even lower, but we're very confident in delivering a new system that's going to function well and be constructible for the total budget that's proposed. And you have the detail, but just keep in mind it starts with it's a $7.1 million construction cost, and then there's contingency on top of that, and engineering just with a sort of guiding percentages and legal. So all the things are there to get you to the 9.6, but it's because it's a healthy number with a healthy budget.
And you said planning and design is not included. Is not billable against the grant.
It is for the WIA, but not the WQIP, which is,
Okay,
I'll talk about, that's where I'd like to end.
Okay,
Because I
good.
think that's the important next step, is to talk about this WQIP.
Sure.
That's an acronym, I'll define it later though.
Okay.
Sorry, we keep doing it.
In terms of cost, and just for that earlier slide with like looking at Beacon and Kingston and Hyde Park, obviously those were smaller numbers. Is that because generally speaking, didn't need as much work, those plants?
Kingston is $10.2 million.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a much bigger city, obviously. It's a
Yeah.
huge- it's a city.
Big, oh yeah, but
Or
it's
was that like that wasn't a full overhaul,
Nope.
those three
it was,
projects?
in that case, it was their outfall, which is really interesting because it's on a very large creek. And so was an outfall replacement, and a replacement of their aeration tanks. So, and with blowers, so just two parts of their very large municipal process.
Yeah, we're actually jumping in, I was there this morning, in Kingston, we're gonna do their headwork, we're doing an evaluation of their headworks and so the grit and, screens. Here, that's the 13.6 peak flow process, so. It's still going.
Yeah, we'll have many
Back
steps
end, now we're jumping
to
in the
keep
front end.
going with to redo their whole plant, but that's what they're looking at. They've
And we're
got-
doing ours all at once.
Exactly. But you have, I'm jumping
No,
into
go
my,
ahead.
you've got DEC permit changes, point scoring. I mean, you've already been successful with WIA. So, I'm very interested in the Wappingers Lake discussion. There is great infrastructure funding right now. This is the time to do it, to get that funding, because who knows when we're gonna see this again. So moving forward and doing this in one piece is what you want for this plant to then be able to handle regulatory changes, flow changes, have operators not standing out in the rain with this rake, getting baby wipes, like a plant that's appropriate for the village. But we're not presenting a Cadillac by any means, but an appropriate, well-built plant that will serve you now moving into the future. This is the moment to do it because the funding is there. So that's, I think, what's important from that consideration. So I did the ones that were right here.
No, I know, yeah.
So, Beacon's a nearly $6 million project. Hyde Park was a much smaller plant, and they only redid a few segments of it, so that was the cost there. That's essentially a plant serving a development, so from a lower
Yeah.
perspective,
Yeah.
it's not a municipal level. In fact,
Right.
Hyde Park continues to struggle. They would love municipal wastewater in their Route 9 corridor, and they just haven't found a path forward yet. I know there's still a lot of passion for them, so you guys are lucky. We also are serving, a lot of communities, Millerton Northeast, town of Red Hook, everyone would desperately love wastewater and miss the boat in the 60s and 70s when that's how long it's been since we've had robust, healthy wastewater and drinking water level infrastructure funding. So that's Clean Water Act, 73. That's really the last time. There's a lot of funding for this. So this is the time to really get yourselves in order and not be doing sort of a patchwork approach. Get a plant, let your plant operate, and don't, eliminate those risks, or at least you can't eliminate all risks, but mitigate the ones you know that are there, like digging up asbestos pipe and reusing structures. And there's good reason to not do that.
All right, so let's talk about next steps. What's your proposed name?
So can I just ask
Yeah, sure,
some
absolutely.
some technical questions? But I don't want technical answers, okay?
Go ahead.
Okay, exactly. So I know part of this is what the operator does, but from a design standpoint, are you proposing a design that will reduce odors, will provide environmental benefits, like the water will be cleaner that we dump in the Wappingers Creek, And will it be cheaper to run?
It will, so first, first question.
Odor.
Odors.
I know you
There
did talk about that
There
before,
shouldn't
but
be
I
any
couldn't follow.
increase in the odors that
Okay.
from the last plant, and hopefully it'll decrease.
The majority of odors is, so what Scott was saying, comes from the solids process. So this has a lot more efficient solids process. And the headworks, when it's during a storm, you're relying on manpower to go out. So those, like the baby wipes, build up on that rack, that first thing we saw in the picture. Just solids collect there. And essentially his team has a long-handled garden trowel with, on a rake handle. And they go out and you manually rake those and then put them into a garbage bin. So they just sit there during that time period. Solids, that's really where the majority of the odors come from. So that's gone. That's going into a closed dumpster or some other process. Right now you're managing your sludge by laying it out to dry in an open picnic pavilion. That's a source of odor. When it's dry, it's fine. But during that time period where it's just sitting there, that's a source of odor. So some of these different processes that are current odor sources are being removed. One of them that we can talk about that wouldn't be removed is the time when the sludge is being aerated. It is not a major source of odor. I know that they say all our noses are bad, but I know when one of my wastewater treatment plants is Chicopee, Massachusetts. It's a 40 MGD plant. One day I was not driving, I was the passenger coming home from New Hampshire on I-90 and woke up and said to my husband, "Where are we?" He goes, "We're in Chicopee." And I was like, "Oh no, something has gone horrible." It woke me up sleeping on I-90, traveling at, I'm sure, the speed limit. And I had to call them the next day and say, "Guys, what's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, it's not good." And so I know what wastewater odor is. And the plant, it's actually really good. Like the odors are really good. But that time period when you're transferring from that aerated process to in the tank, that's when they shut the air off. And that's when you allow it to sit so they can then pump it off. If talking about some mitigation methods for that, we are happy to look at that and do that. But definitely some of these other sources, the solid tank, they're gone. They're in this proposal, we've eliminated them. So I feel very good that we are taking away odor sources, but there is one that definitely is a typical part, would be a part of anything, any proposal in front of you, is that method of solids removal with the truck. And so we can absolutely talk about a way to mitigate that aspect, but we definitely are removing a bunch of others. Regulatory compliance, you have tons of flexibility. So for making the water cleaner, in addition to one, there is no overflow here. The DEC has said no overflow, no use of that tank. That's gone. That is not part of this process. When you have high flows, having partially treated wastewater go into the creek, done. So we're gonna remove, there's gotta be phosphorus, just even if we don't add, there's untreated wastewater right now, or minimally treated, that can goes to the outfall essentially when you have these high storm events. Gone. That is not a part of this. There is, and that was, I know the other approach you were looking at had sort of a bypass, but no, we want to treat all the wastewater to meet the permit limit.
And you're getting rid of your overflow tanks, which is a big one.
Yeah. What was the third thing?
Which doesn't even function.
Oh,
Is it gonna be
energy
less
efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
That's-
from a operation standpoint, definitely more energy efficient. And if we can get to gravity, which we know we want to, then even better, because then we eliminate pumping that you're currently doing. So.
Thank you.
I think I'd throw out just a question that has nothing to do with possibly the design you're looking at, but does any part of this, given the space that we have, which I know is extremely limited, lend itself to possibly converting some of this electrical use to solar use, so that we would be able to use some of solar panels or something of that nature as part of the process anywhere on the facility?
Well, again, I don't know as far as flooding and whatever is concerned, but the drying, not the drying, but
The sand
are gonna
filter.
go away. And I think solar panels are put on weights. I just, in that area, there's a lot of trees. So I don't know how much, I don't even know whether it's south facing. It is south facing. At least two directions, I think you
Yeah.
potentially get that, but I wouldn't hold my breath on it personally, but there might be, that space is all gonna be opened up now, so.
As long as
Right.
though the foundations of the solar panels don't get us involved in the
Oh,
asbestos
Right,
pipe.
Okay.
I don't think they do. I think the solar panel, they can put them on blocks, because they put them on
Oh, yeah.
landfills and whatnot. So.
You're right, yes, same way, we
Or
wanna do it the
cutting
same
down
way.
We
trees.
got that on film?
The people who live there probably don't want that.
No,
No.
No.
but in the, what we're talking about is the big sand filters,
Right.
we are suggesting abandon in place,
Right.
bring topsoil and grass. But what better to do would be to put solar panels on them what you would do is you'd have someone come and do the energy verification, just like they do at your house, to make sure it's a viable location, because there's no point in the expense if it's not gonna pay back.
Mhm.
But that would be a very cool use for that space that would be able to shave O&M costs off, so.
And that also would probably make the project more attractive for funding.
More sustainability in that sense,
Mhm.
in the long run. Yeah.
Interesting thought, okay.
We've got a great group who does power and solar projects, so that will be probably a pretty brief phone call to figure out just what it would take to verify that it's a feasible location, so.
All right, any more questions before we go on to the next steps here? All right,
Just hit that button. Or not, don't hit the button, you're making me hit the button. Okay, there, beautiful, okay, so this is what's gonna happen. You've got the WIA, so the WIA is the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. It's been awarded to you, so that's fantastic. However, you are in great position to go for additional funding, and you can absolutely double dip in this case. So the next grant that's coming available is the WQIP, the Water Quality Improvement Program. That is not through EFC, which is the WIA grant, it's through DEC. DEC thinks you should go for this grant, so this is good stuff. And as we talked about, we are having more points to be scored equal more fundability.
so we have this through EFC,
WIA is administered through the Environmental Facilities Corp.
yeah, okay, which is New York State.
And New York State, but it's federal oriented funds. They're and then the WQIP is a New York State fund, so
Okay.
they're not stepping on each other's toes. You can't match federal with federal, but you can match federal with state. So that is going to come up with the CFA. So the current round of WIA is open now, but the CFA is coming up. So
Well, what's CFA?
okay, so you get to the WQIP through the consolidated funding application. And that is something that New York State did, I want to say, they're heading towards at least 10 years ago. And they said, instead of all these different places to apply to a grant, there's one application that's going to open and you're going to apply that way. And the WQIP through DEC is what's available through the consolidated funding application. They won't open it until the budget passes, but right now what we think is it's going to be open for application at the end of May, mid to end of May, and that's coming really fast.
Okay,
Typically it's due in August. What we need to have before you go to the WQIP, first of all, I don't think your PER currently, your preliminary engineering report that you currently have, while you were able to use it to secure the WIA, now that DEC has changed what you need, I'm not sure that approach would actually continue to fly, because to me it doesn't meet all of what DEC now is asking the village to do.
let's go back to WIA. So we received a grant of 25% on a project cost of $7.35 million
Yes,
and a 30-year zero interest loan.
Yep.
For the remainder.
yes.
And there's talk of, and I haven't heard this officially, but Delaware told us that's now been increased to 50%. I asked EFC for proof of that. don't have that yet. But,
Yeah, and I don't
Is
think
there a
that
way
they're
that we
two
could-
yet, but they are matching with the BIL, the
what's the,
bipartisan infrastructure law funds. So that, was the big infrastructure act that was passed. It's also called IIJA.
okay.
Oh my
All
God.
right.
I
But look,
what's
what I want to know is,
Yeah,
Oh,
is
all
we
in
already got this
infrastructure
grant.
bills.
Are we
Yeah.
able to go back and say, oh, the project isn't 7.35, it's 9.6?
Possibly, yes. And that's also something that we might want to do.
Uh-huh.
So, but how
we
you
definitely
do
would wanna
that
do that.
is with a updated PER. And that is the preliminary engineering report. So the last one you had was 2022. And again, I don't think it's going to achieve, I don't think DEC, who is the target, who now needs to be your grant target, it would look at that and say, yes, this is gonna meet what we asked you to do when we changed your permit. So what I really would encourage you to do, if Ty and Vaughn is selected as a successful engineer, I wrote up a proposal and I sent it out for you to look at. Let's get the PER updated right away so you're in position as soon as the CFA, Consolidated Funding Application, opens, that you have the ability to get that WQIP money, because you need that updated report to do that. And so really important, whatever you do moving forward, if it's not with Ty and Bond, get in position to go after that WQIP. And just things move, you have to pass resolutions. I know you have to get on the agenda if you need a resolution, especially if it's bonding, which is part of that requirement. So it might feel like end August is a lot of time. It's gonna go like this. So if my next step is get fired up, please, about getting ready to go after those WQIP funds. Now, the WQIP will not pay for engineering design. It pays for construction. It's typically 40%, and will do any of those services during construction. So like construction observation, it will pay for that, but it won't pay for design. So if the village decides to authorize design to start moving forward, it doesn't matter, because the WQIP wouldn't pay for it anyway. So you're not cutting yourself off. Additionally, as long as things are done in the proper manner from a contractual standpoint, you're still qualified. As an example, in the proposal I sent, you'll notice it is thick because there is something that's required by EFC, which is called the Part 2 contractual requirements, and it's saying yes, any design professional agrees to follow EFC's requirements, and so we just adopt them into any proposal from us, because it's saying yes, we are going to comply with your grant requirements. Again, big deal.
All right, so I'm still not sure how this dual funding will work. If we got a WQIP, we have the WIA.
Yep.
Let's assume that's 25%, right, of 7.35 million. And what I understand is we would do the project, and EFC would provide the funding up front. And once the project is complete, then they would, take 25% off, 50%, whatever it is, and then start requiring us to pay an annual, principal to pay off the rest over 30 years.
Short-term financing also, it pauses during the entire construction.
Yeah, that's right. We don't pay anything until the project is done.
So you don't pay a cent until it's
All right. So
done.
how does QIP overlay this?
So it's gonna reduce your capital. So the point is, you're gonna be left with a lower loan bill at the end. So
Right.
that capital's gonna come off. We've had projects where they're both co-funded by them. So they tend to work out a system that
They do?
works because both of them are qualified for the Clean Water SRF loan. So they're both working under the.
So EFC works with DEC to coordinate.
Yes.
Okay.
It's totally doable.
That sounds like probably the first time that ever happened, but okay, sure.
Yeah.
I'll see how that works. All
It's,
right.
No, it's going in. I've been in a project where they awarded more after the fact, and then it's like, oh, well, which part's ours, and how do we do this? Going in, it's construction where it gets confusing, again, because there's no overlap during design funding. There's only one funding source that you would be interested in. So it's just the construction phase where they've got this side, you've got this side, and everything else is being funded.
And starting from day one, when you embark upon the design and all the analysis you want to do to prepare for, just exactly what are the design options, that would be paid to you by EFC?
You pay us, you're reimbursed.
Okay,
by
we're
EFC.
reimbursed, okay.
Yep. And
But they will reimburse us 100%.
yeah, we do, yes, and
Okay,
we
fine.
do the disbursement funds.
What does
We
that mean?
will help, we,
Oh, you, to other
one of
other
our
contractors,
things we are
okay.
gonna help you do is these disbursement paperwork,
Okay.
because again, it's never ending, the
Right.
process, and so there's, very strict things we have to, so I gave you a proposal for updating the PER and doing the WQuick grant application, because whatever engineer you choose to move forward in, they have minority woman business requirements that must be met, and that's 20%. So I'd love to give you a proposal for our full scope and just but it involves me working with other sub-consultants to figure out how am I going to get to 20%. So some ways we would do this, definitely survey, definitely geotech. I have a good structural engineer I work with and an electrical engineer. And then in that case, our folks become more advisory over them. But we want to look at those options and see what's the best way to get to 20%. But 20% has to be with those requirements. Then during the design process, monthly, we report through the village, someone from the village signs off on how that we have sub-consultants, we're paying them, we have a utilization plan, and then EFC reviews that, and that's part of your disbursement. So you submit the invoices, they pay you to pay us, and that's how it
I
works.
mentioned this, EFC, I got some guidelines from them, and they said one of the requirements is to have at least 3 submissions for the RFQ. We only got 2. Is that a problem? We did all the process to publicize it, right, and all that kind of good stuff.
You publicly advertised it.
Huh?
You public.
Right.
Who's your contact? I think that's where the further discussion.
Contact?
Who have you been talking to at EFC? It's not Rebecca, is it?
Yeah, Rebecca, right.
Yes.
Lanahan, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just spent a lot of time with her.
Okay,
I
good.
got that. Well, regardless, I will call Rebecca.
Okay, good. She's the one, by the way, I sent the request this week to show me proof that we get the 50% grant instead of the 25%.
So
I haven't gotten an answer, by the way, yet.
So I won't embarrass Rebecca. Rebecca's father is a sole proprietor engineer named Pat Prendergast, and so he and I have worked together for years. And so she is the second generation in engineering. So I think she is a really great person at EFC to work with. She's really responsive. So if she's your contact, you did very good. You pulled a good lucky draw there.
I didn't even know it.
Yeah, no, she's really great. I've had to tell other people to call Rebecca around their contact to get an answer, and it's worked. So she's really great. All right, so the next step for us should be to decide who we go with for engineering firm. Absolutely.
Okay.
And look at the proposal we put in front of you. Mm-hmm. It's for $24,000, and a tremendous amount of that work rolls right into preliminary design. In addition to
where did I see that? $24,000.
With that.
Oh, that was in it? Okay. All right, fine.
In that proposal, though, you have every bit of our scope as we intend to do it. So also it's a great discussion on, is there something else that should be in our scope? Mm-hmm. We have laid out the entire scope for you.
All right.
The only thing, there's no numbers associated with the rest of it, because I want to tell you who would bring you as a team to have a utilization plan that meets the EFC requirements.
Okay.
Very important, and I love our sub-consultants, but I don't want them to develop a detailed quote if we're not selected.
Sure.
But it felt reasonable
Makes sense.
to not do that.
Okay, so Aaron, I think what I want to do is, after you're finished, I want to go into executive session with Scott and the board to talk about the next step.
Excellent.
Anything else you want to share with us?
Anything else?
Are you going to send us a copy of this?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Absolutely. I will email it in PDF format. Does that
That'd be
sound
great.
good? Okay.
From Tig and Bond's perspective, would you say that Delaware is your biggest competitor in this region?
No. We more are seeing ourselves in between like a CT Mail company formerly known as Chazen. We'll compete a bit with CDM. They're a very large, Arcadis and CDM are now thousands of people, but in some cases we're the right engineer and compete with them. We're seeing MJ more. I think that's all I want to say about that.
Okay. And you're employee owned, right? You're not
very
owned
much.
by a foreign corporate entity or something like that?
So I told Tim originally I couldn't be here, and I had to work it out. We have an annual stockholders meeting that is mandatory for everyone who's a stockholder to attend. And I was in Westfield and drove straight here from Westfield. So we are 100% employee owned, and we have been since 1911. I guess during the 80s there was a brief foray into considering something else. We are also diversified from that stock perspective, that no single person owns enough that would even be able to consider getting involved with equity funds or something along those lines. So we're time bond, we've been time bond, we will continue to be time bond. Our board, I just came off a two-year term of sitting on our board of directors. We are passionately for not being acquired and for staying employee owned. So it's very serious to us to continue that. There's a lot of company formerly known as, formerly known as Morris, company formerly known as Chase and O'Brien Gears, now Ramble. It goes on and on. That will not be a situation ever. It would be almost impossible to even navigate the way we're set up with the employee ownership. So.
Thank you.
And roughly how long would this project take to do from start to finish? Roughly.
It's in the very large
Is it-
proposal
what
document
it
put
says?
together
27.
at the
And it starts this year, 3 years?
yeah starting
It's about 3 years.
yeah
Okay,
so complete operation
Yeah.
done.
okay. Oh,
That's what you sent Monday?
Yeah. I just,
All right.
this step is really important, so I want you to have the tools to just, as soon as you can, if it's not us, just get going, prepare for this W quick. So I just want you to, it feels like, it seems like August is a long time away, it's not.
Mhm.
With all the different steps you have to do to put together a successful grant application, you be ready to start. So I just want to put something in front of you that would get you to that first
All right, good.
step. So, in a compliant format with EFC, so totally be reimbursable once you've closed with EFC. But I would say negotiating and getting closed with EFC, that's also pretty high on your list. So you can start having that disbursement funds for
Okay, good.
any engineering design.
all right. It was an excellent presentation, Aaron. Damien, thank you very much.
Tim, thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Layla, for executive session.
Is tomorrow morning?
We can't have
okay for
anybody in the
me to
audience,
email?
okay?
Okay, all right.
And before we go into
Yeah, sure.
executive session, can we talk about body armor for a second?
Yeah, sure. Let's wait till they go.
Okay.
Oh, before executive session?
However you want to do it.
Yeah. We can do the general meeting, yeah. That's what we'll take care of that.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you.
Sure, if we can go ahead, body armor.
Okay, so, I
And
mentioned,
personal protective equipment.
yeah, I mentioned, in our last meeting that in order to pursue this grant
Take care.
opportunity, we needed to have an approved policy mandating the use of body armor when we have it.
Mhm.
So we asked Lexipol to go over the policy with us that they would propose that we use. We did that, and I just wanna get it approved so that we can.
Yeah, so we just did it yesterday, and I just sent it out today to the board. So has the board had a chance to look at this yet?
I did this afternoon.
You did?
Yeah,
Okay.
I haven't had a chance.
Haven't had a chance yet? So what about this? Can we just give them a day or two to review it and then email back?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, or what do you think?
I mean, it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
Right. I hadn't read it either, Patrick, but I mean, from my perspective, what was,
Yeah.
we're
Well, why don't you make a motion that
Neophytes
everyone accepts
here.
it? Make a motion, Vicky.
Okay, I'm making a motion that the board accepts the body armor policy that Lexipol proposed.
And
I'll
in the
second
personal
that.
private, wait, and the personal private equipment, personal,
I don't need that for the grant, but if you want to.
yeah, let's do it, because we did both those.
Do you want,
Okay.
well, the personnel part of it's like 119 pages.
No, not personnel, this is the protective
Then,
equipment.
oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The body armor is a lot more manageable. I skimmed 190. The body armor.
No, personnel, separate that, that's
Oh,
later.
that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
All right, so again,
Personal.
All right.
make your,
So I am proposing that we approve two policies, one on body armor and the other one on personal protective equipment.
okay, a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, good, done.
Thank you.
Scott, I'll let you stay for the executive session. All right, so I want to go into executive session. Sarah?
let me just, hang on.
Yeah, wait.
Sorry. Okay. Let me